Welcome back to the next part. So I'm going to show you how to add interesting color to the pumpkin and to the stem. Let's now save our scene. So save as, we are going to say add extra details. Okay, and accept. So let's now add a color node. So after the mountain, I'm going to add color. So the colors that I have used were just basic orange. So we can adjust this to be somewhere around actually 0.75, 0.13, and 0.0375. So that was kind of the color. However, you know, we don't want the whole pumpkin to be just one color, and we also want to take the crevices and have a darker color maybe there, and then around the edges, and also maybe the interior part we also want to color differently. So we can do those things by driving the color from specific attributes. One of the most popular one would be the curvature. So if we press tab and look for labs curvature, so let's try labs measure curvature. Let's put it here. So since we have a heavy mesh, it will can take some time to calculate, but you can kind of see that the curvature here is going to use green and black and red colors. I usually like to set it to grayscale. And then what we can do is we can adjust the convexity and concavity separately to see all those curvature attribute details. So the values would be quite high. So for the convexity, this was the primary one that I used 1500. And now you can see that we are capturing a lot of the details on the surface from that. And then for the concavity, we can set it to 1000 as well. And this is what we have. Okay, so now if I would drive the color from one of these attributes, convexity or concavity, I would get something more interesting. So if you go to the color node, and if I change the color type from constant to ramp from attribute, we can now specify the attribute here. So I'm going to click down and I'm going to use concavity. And it's going to be black and white, but let's set it to be the pumpkin colors that I had there. Let's actually go back. So 0.75, 0.1325, and 0.0375. Okay, so that was my left, and this one is going to be a bit darker. Okay, so actually no, this was the right one. Yeah, and then the left one would be darker. So the left one was 1.25 and 0. Quite simple. Okay, so now you can see the most of the pumpkin is bright orange, but the crevices are darker color. And then for the interior part, we want it to be also brighter color. So we can use mask from geometry, and we can also take the outside of the pumpkin. So let's do something like that. Let's do mask from geometry. And obviously we want this to be from points. And it's very simple. We just need to connect the outer pumpkin shape before we did any extrusion or distortion, so it would be right after the match size. So we can probably make some room here like this. So this is just optional, and then from the match size, from the actual build the pumpkin shape. And this is why these node networks are also helpful, right? So we can just drag that one to this one, and we can preview the mask. So let's click on mask. Let's make sure it's visible in the viewport. Again, let's make sure it's visible. Okay, so the mask is there, but it is the radius is too big, so we're going to reduce it. So 0.025, and there we go. So now we have the pumpkin like this. So the interior is going to be completely different color, and I actually like that it captures these areas. So some of the parts would be darker, some of the parts would be brighter. It actually going to look much nicer. So after this one, after we have this new mask, we can now drive a color adjustment by this mask. So let's use attribute adjust color. So attribute adjust color here. And what we actually want is to just add to the color values that we have. So let's actually turn off the mask so we don't see it. And by default, it will just override with white. But if I set this to add, and if I say that I only want to add based on the mask attribute, which you can set here in the pattern type, you can say remap attribute, and it will just give me this. But if I change this ramp to something like black to orange, there we go. So now we actually have the opposite. I wanted the interior to be brighter. So it would be as simple as just inverting this ramp. So we can just do something like this, or we can invert the mask. So now the interior parts of the pumpkin would be brighter, and then this is the exterior part. Okay. So if you want the actual outside of the pumpkin to be just one color with the crevices, all you need to do is just to add this part to the masking geometry. So for example, if I select these, Control C, Control V, let's wait till they get pasted. So for instance, if we swap this one with this one, now you would see that the interior is much cleaner and the exterior is just like this darker orange with these crevices. But again, I like to have more variation, so I'm gonna keep it without these, but feel free to do that if you need. So after we did this, we can now add some color to the stem. Before I do that though, I want to clean up the shape a little bit, so we can convert this to a VDB. We can do VDB from polygons, and we will set this to be 0.0025. So this will give us a shape that is not ideal, even with a simple VDB, which would be a very high resolution. We can get something like this. Maybe what we can do instead of that, there is a node that can fix a lot of these things. It's called VDB topology from SDF. It works great if you have very thin areas in your VDB. So this is what it gives, and then we can smooth it like that. And then we can also use VDB reshape to erode it a little bit so it's not as thick. So let's use erode 2 times, and there we go. So after this one, we can convert this to convert VDB, and we can say convert to polygons, And there we go. So we have a nice stem geometry that is much cleaner. We can use some adaptivity, but I'm actually not going to use any adaptivity because I want more even topology here. And we are just going to do the same thing. We're going to measure the curvature. Labs measure curvature. We're going to set the this to grayscale. I'm going to set the convexity. I'm going to set it to 1000, and concavity as well. Let's do 1000 and 1000. Okay, something more like this. You can also blur it a bit. So for example, if we do 10, blur, maybe 1000 is too much. Let's do 500 and 500 here. It's a little bit hard to see, but once we apply the color, we will be able to see it. So let's do color. Color. So we are going to say that I want the color ramp from attribute, and I want the convexity to drive the color. Yeah, maybe this is a little bit too much. But what I actually want, I want the outside to be brighter, and then the inside I want to be green color. So we can set this to something like 0.075, and then, oops, let's set the position back. Then I'm going to set this one to 0.09 and 0.0225. Okay, so now let's play with the convexity. Maybe that was too much, 101. We can also play with this value. Okay, so for some reason this doesn't want to. 1. Okay, so maybe, yeah, maybe for my original I used 1000, but for this one, just using 1 is fine. So this is good. Again, feel free to color it any way you like. I'm gonna stick to this one, and then we can now merge the colored pumpkin together. So this is where we create the color. Okay, and that could be the part of the stem. Okay, and then here we add the colors. So let's select these, add a network box. Add color. You can color this like that. And let's merge them together. So now we can see both the pumpkin and the stem. Cool. So now the final step would be adding an overall distortion, because this still looks a little bit too symmetrical. We want to distort it a little bit more. And this is what really can make your pumpkin look special and interesting. So let's add a mountain. And we want to distort both the stem and the pumpkin. So we are not going to distort like that. Yeah, we're not going to use any attribute. So let's turn it off. And I'm going to use, again, a very small value, 0.025. I don't want to distort. If you look, it distorts it upward a little bit too much. So I'm going to click on XYZ here, and I'm going to reduce the Y axis 0.5. And then we can also reduce the element size to 0.35. So it will make it, yeah, more like this. Okay, and then this should be our more or less final looking pumpkin. And the other important part, I want to make sure it still sits on the ground. So I'm going to do match size. And we are going to say justify Y to be minimum. So it's just going to nudge it a little bit like that. Cool. So this is the pumpkin. It is basically now ready to go into lighting and rendering. I'm going to set an output here. So null out pumpkin, out render, so we can have it go to Solaris. And then in the next part, we will focus on the dynamic elements, such as the smoke and the pyro dust coming from the eyes and the mouth. And then we'll also take a look at how to create the candles, which is pretty simple, and this skeleton. All right, I'll see you in the next part.